Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's class on balancing your hormones naturally. We got Millman on here. Hey, Millman. Welcome. We're going to be really digging into the process of, just how do you get hormones balanced in a natural, way, and what are some of the major hormone disruptors, or what we call endocrine disruptors. So we're going to dig into that, and it's just such a super important piece because when it comes to getting back vitality, hormones are such an essential part to that, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, fatigue, any type of hormone disruption can drive fatigue, changes in your skin, hair loss, weight gain. I mean, loss of libido, no energy, poor drive, neurodegenerative changes are huge with hormone disruption. So just, you lose that personality, that spark to your life, and nobody wants to lose that spark. So let's dig into this. Let me get this up and going. And this isn't going to be a super long class. Just we're going to touch on some of the basics and really kick everything off here. So I think this is a really key point to talk about. And I talk about this in some of the presentations is the estrobolome or the estrobome. I don't know. People say it all kinds of different ways. I like saying the estrobolome. What is that? Well, that is the process by which your body gets rid of excess estrogen after it's been used. You get a little bit of reabsorption. There's this conjugation process, a very complex process happens in the gut, but it's dependent on good gut bacteria, right? So we get so much disruption in our gut that causes this excess estrogen accumulation, right? I mean, how many people do we see with a disrupted microbiome?
I can't think of one person
that doesn't have it, right?
Doesn't have it.
Yeah, everybody gets it. And so you couple that with foods that are high in estrogens, what we call phytoestrogen mostly, that'll drive that. This is a YouTube link to an awesome video on estrogens that you come across in your environment. But not just foods, but some chemicals. So like soy. Soy is considered an estrogen, and I've seen some research both ways. But one thing that we do know that soy does is it upregulates these estrogen receptors and makes them super sensitive and get triggered very, very easy. And so you start getting this excess estrogen accumulation or production. Sugar, absolutely, on multiple different pathways. The inflammatory pathway can cause excess estrogens. You gain fat. Fat will produce estrogen. Fat will produce more inflammation. Conventional meats and dairy. Now, one of the processes there is that the foods that they're eating are low in omega fatty acids, especially your omega-3, high in omega-6. They're eating all these foods. The hormones that they're given to grow for growth cause excess estrogen production, right? Anything that you would add to on the meat or the dairy as far as estrogen?
No, I think the big one are the antibiotics and the steroids and growth enhancers, like you said.
Yeah, and that's the thing about a steroid is it drives up all sex hormones. So you can get excess testosterone as well. But then the BPA plastics and Teflon pans, those are what we call xenoestrogens. And so these are going to be chemical estrogens that really stimulate our estrogen profile. And the bad thing about every one of these, not only do they trigger higher estrogen, but at the same time, they are disrupting the ability for you to get rid of that excess estrogen. So it's like this nasty situation that occurs. So you really have to do what you can to avoid those. Every person will eventually have a change in their hormonal balance from puberty to menopause, right? And those changes, like men will undergo andropause, and with women, you'll see the menopause. And there's a huge shift, and it's basically our body going from fertility to longevity. But if your body is in a stress response, if the hormones are in balance, you can trigger that super, super early. And it doesn't mean it can't be reversed as long as you can change the environment, exterior and interior of the body, right? That's a really interesting thing. But like the sugars for men will cause testosterone to be converted to estrogen. Excess sugars for women will cause the opposite, estrogen to be converted to testosterone. That's that PCOS process, right? And this causes a lot of problems for people. So some of the underlying factors that can cause these health problems, stress, right? Because cortisol is very disruptive. It'll disrupt the balance of your hormones. Nutritional deficiencies, and that's one of the triggers we talk about. These are all the triggers: foods, bugs, stress hormones, and toxins. So nutritional deficiencies and food intolerance. So in the food category, you lose the ability to break down certain foods, you get sensitive to certain foods, and then you get this food intolerance. And then heavy metal accumulation can disrupt the detoxification process. And then the environmental toxicities, right?
Yeah.
Anything that you would add to that? It's crazy when we talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's enough. Every day that we wake up, we're exposed to all of them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to do everything you can in all of the healthy behaviors and all of these different ways to support so that we don't become imbalanced.
Right.
Because we're faced with them as soon as we wake up and walk out the door.
Yeah. It's crazy because you're immediately met with these things. This is from Dr. Lee, MD, with Hopkins, and this is all the way back in 1996, and that's how long we've had research on this stuff. And according to Dr. Lee's research, that hormones go out of balance because of an overconsumption of estrogens. So that causes estrogen dominance, but that'll also happen because we can't get rid of those estrogens. And that'll look like a progesterone problem. And in women, especially if we're looking at increasing fertility, improving PCOS, reversing some of these hormone issues, progesterone is needed for a healthy cycle. It helps maintain the uterine linings for implantation. Progesterone is also one of the hormones that, and I talk about this a lot, is if a woman's progesterone is low, it's one of the hormones that makes them get a positive feedback to physical touch and intimacy. Mm-hmm. You know, so if you're like, you just have no interest in intimacy, you don't like being touched, a lot of time that's a progesterone issue, but it could be that it's not truly progesterone deficiency, it's just excess estrogen.
Yeah.
What was you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, not really the opposite, but sometimes people assume that they have estrogen dominance, but it's also because that it also could just be that they have low progesterone.
Right.
So that's why balancing it and always being aware what those are is important.
Yeah, and you can also get what we call progesterone resistance. But the thing is about what we're talking about today is one of the first things to do is start to limit these environmental estrogens that we either come into contact with or that we consume. And so symptoms of estrogen dominance are very identical to PMS because that excess estrogen that you'll see in menopause is estrone, and it disrupts everything else. So you get fibrocystic breast diseases, endometriosis, and PCOS. So it's pretty crazy the symptoms you'll get. Estrogen imbalance, it can be improved. And this is why, people wonder if the natural approach actually works. It actually works amazingly because what you're doing is you're giving the body what it needs to do the job while also minimizing all the different things that make the situation worse. So you eliminate those estrogen-containing foods like poultry and meats and dairies such as milk and cheese. And, if you're doing an aged cheese or an A2 milk, we give a little bit of flexibility there. Because those are things I like. You don't have to be vegan to get these things turned around, but you do have to be highly selective and make sure that if you're having animal products that they're clean, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's one of the bigger problems is our overproduction and commercialization of the foods that we get, especially meats. So you'll benefit in general by switching to free-range eggs. What are free-range eggs going to have in them where regular eggs wouldn't? Like a non-free range, what do we typically see more in, or why would you recommend it? Yeah. Omega-3, huge variation, right? Wild caught fish, we talk about this quite a bit. High omega-3 fatty acids, really good amounts of selenium that you need for your thyroid. That's going to balance those hormones. Organic plain yogurt, you do not You do not want to get those additional hormones, and you don't want to get too much sugar. So these are ways to do that. A primary factor, especially in women's health, you'll see it during years of fertility. It involves hormones released by their stress organs or the adrenal glands, which are little bitty, like walnut-sized organs that sit on top of the kidneys. And so the adrenals have a couple different pathways, but they produce your cortisol. And when you experience, a challenging situation, the adrenals will secrete your stress hormones that put you in that flight or fight mechanism. And we call that flight or fight. But here's what's crazy, and I think this is super important, is that you need good cortisol. It's naturally anti-inflammatory. It regulates our circadian rhythm, which if it's irregular, if it's too high or too low, and we don't talk about low enough, that also will disrupt this hormone balance, right?
Right.
So you want to make sure you get that control. But, talking about hormone imbalance, this is something so key because it'll disrupt follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone balance, which interferes with fertility for women and men, but it also makes them feel really off. And then a large percentage of your sex hormones, about 15%, come from the adrenals. But if cortisol is in high demand, whether it's because of a really acute high stress situation, if it's episodic stress, or even if it's post-traumatic stress, your body has to feed that cortisol because it's the one hormone that's there to save your life. And so if you don't have enough of it, that's life-threatening. So your body puts resources to it when it's in high demand and takes away from estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
Yeah.
It can single-handedly derail your hormones, your vitality, your fertility, right?
Right.
What are some symptoms people typically see with high cortisol?
Well, often it's fatigue because they're spiking, going low, and it's really exhausting, using all the energy, and really a lot of confusion and imbalance. Depending on the window of the day, they can't sleep, they can't turn their brain off. Yeah, and then that triggers all kinds of other inflammatory responses.
That's that wired yet tired, right?
Mm-hmm. I see that a lot.
Wake up not feeling rested. We'll see on the blood, we'll see insulin resistance or blood sugar irregularities. It's crazy. The hypoglycemia, it's so crazy. So you don't want that. And unfortunately, the way we're wired with our ancestral DNA is getting a bill in the mail that you didn't expect has the same response as if someone pulled a gun on you, right? You're going to get that cortisol response, just to a different degree.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fit, right?
Yeah, that's the point, is that you've got the rhythm that you're supposed to follow naturally, but then when you have these other triggers, then we don't know it. We take it for granted that throughout the day we're being triggered and spiking and going low. So that's why it's important to, in all aspects of behavior and intake, to keep as balanced as you can.
Yeah, super huge. And so because of these constant upsets and challenges, the gland, the adrenals, eventually lose their ability to keep up with what you need. People, they need a lot more sugar and caffeine, but those actually will further exhaust the glands. So you want to know where they're at, because low cortisol is just as disruptive as high cortisol. It'll throw off your thyroid, and it'll cause all these other hormonal shifts. So life truly is about balance and homeostasis. Homeostasis is just the scientific word for balance. And so we're looking for this harmonizing of the hormones, but before you can have harmony in your body, you've got to have balance. Balance comes first, right? And so we have to look at all these things that we talk about. We said this just a little bit, but cortisol, it's the adrenals release that cortisol, which affects your blood sugar. It's a glucocorticoid, so it exhibits its effect on the body by glucose. It regulates your circadian rhythm, your internal clock. Your biological rhythm is based on natural, regular, rhythmic releases, as a tongue twister, of cortisol being regular. It's supposed to be high in the morning and slowly come down over to the daytime. So at night, it's at its lowest point. And as that goes down, your melatonin goes up, and that triggers sleep. It induces fatigue so you can go to sleep. But if it's off, you'll have some serious issues with losing weight.
yeah, if it's off, and especially if it's, let's say it's even starting with that regular nice rhythm, so it's highest and going lower like it's supposed to, but then if it's shooting up in that window from 10 to 12 or 10 to 2 a.m., then that's a big serious problem too.
Yeah, where are you typically going to put on cortisol body fat?
Belly.
Belly, right? You'll see it. It's at, the muffin top. That's might be offensive to some, but that's where you're going to put it, around the gut. So if cortisol is too high, your blood sugar is going to stay high, and you're staying stressed. If cortisol tanks, you get hypoglycemia, and if cortisol stays too low or too high, it disrupts your thyroid. So it's just a bad situation. The adrenal glands and cortisol can be repaired with proper products and dietary changes that we see on people's tests, like your omega fatty acids. These are really incredibly important to heal it. Sometimes we'll put people on a ketogenic diet. That's really good for the adrenals. Pantothenic acid, or B5. Sometimes we use adaptogrin or adaptogen. Some people we put on glycine or glycine synergy. They have the adaptogens. They help regulate it. Phosphatidylserine helps it from spiking and staying chronically high, right? Rhodiola.
Ashwagandha.
It all depends on you and what was in your test. And that's why we say test, don't guess. And every one of you have a different path in each step that we're doing that's so important for you. But what you do also contributes to it. It doesn't matter how much we supplement. You have to stick to the changes that we recommend and at some point we start into the 5 healthy behaviors, and those are really critical for that. So the next factor to consider is these environmental toxins due to past traumas, which can actually result in the gland or the organ being dysfunctional. So one of those is going to be, you can have physical trauma to the brain, which throws off your pituitary gland. If you've had any neck trauma, just something to remember is they say that the weight of a dime, and I bring this up from time to time, the weight of a dime, think how light that is. The weight of a dime on a spinal nerve decreases circulation to everything that nerve feeds by 60%. So where do you get your pain? Think about it. If you're pointing to your neck, that's your thyroid. If you're pointing to your mid-back, your thoracic area, that's going to affect your liver and your spleen, and maybe your gallbladder. That's going to affect your hormone metabolism and breakdown. If it's upper mid-back or lower mid-back or upper low back, that's going to be your ovaries, your adrenal glands. That can disrupt that. And then in the gut, even worse for women and men, it can affect the lower genitals because of these things. So physical stress, those types of traumas, can disrupt circulation, cause inflammation, downregulate how the organs are working. And then, these exterior toxins that we're getting. Monsanto is an incredible one because we're talking about Roundup. So that's glyphosate. And glyphosate was originally used for insect and weed resistance, basically, right? So you spray it on there, they coat these things. And I don't know if you've ever been to a farm. I grew up in Indiana, and they would have these wheat farms. And when they gather the wheat, when the wheat was drying, they would just coat them with Roundup, to keep the bugs off of it. Tomatoes were modified, right? And so that makes them resistant, but it changes their chemical structures. And the problem is there's no label required. So you don't want GMO foods because really we don't know what the long-term effects of these things are going to be. We're just starting to see some stuff, but Roundup's crazy what it does to the body. So, you want organic, you want hormone and antibiotic free, you want free range. These are some really key pieces. So the health impacts of GMOs, just on the stuff we've seen, is the body can't break them down. Mm-hmm. Modern wheat is basically modified. It was a hybridized version of Eichhorn wheat that became dwarf wheat. Our bodies didn't know what to do with it. It's a foreign molecule. And so with all these different genetically modified foods, the sugars have different structures that naturally occur. And so you are going to see GI issues because our digestive tract sees it as a foreign thing. It's not used. Like I said, we're built on ancestral DNA. You're going to get obesity, diabetes or diabesity, heart disease, stroke, all these issues, depression, cancer, Alzheimer's. Our body doesn't know how to absorb, filter, use, and get rid of these different things, right?
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, it's huge. And then monosodium glutamate, or MSG, this is another chemical that's crazy. Is MSG will spike your insulin 300% to 400% after consuming it. That throws off your blood sugar way more than anything else. So you'll see it as all kinds of stuff. Autolyzed,
Yes.
mess that up, yeast, extract natural flavors. You got to be real careful with natural flavors. If you see natural flavors on the ingredient list, you need to contact the manufacturer and find out what that means. Modified food starch, cornstarch. The thing is MSG is an amazing preservative, but it intensifies our taste buds. It's really good for sales because people crave it, but it's very addictive. It increases our serotonin, causes us to overeat, causes leptin resistance, which tells us that we're full, and it just keeps your brain wanting more. And so it's basically a drug, and a very, very bad drug habit to have. A lot of people, me, if I get too much MSG, I'll get nauseated. I had a patient that in Houston, and she would, if she got any MSG at all, she would have this cyclical vomiting, and just constantly vomiting for days after one meal with MSG. And then her daughter ended up having it too. So,
well, and the thing is that a lot of people think that it's mostly in Chinese food, but it's in so many other things because it's labeled as natural flavors. Or actually, MSG is the same as a number of other names. So you don't even know that you're eating it sometimes.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And that's disruptive because insulin's going to make you, it's going to make you gain weight, and insulin suppresses your ability to heal. It suppresses your thyroid hormone. It's so crazy. And then the growth hormone in animals. So there's 6 anabolic steroids that are given to nearly all animals in feedlots. And the FDA says, well, this is an acceptable amount that you can use for their daily intakes. 50 years of exposure has made us fatter with lower sperm counts because we're getting hormones that are disrupting our hormones, right? So I think your bigger takeaways is when you're naturally balancing your hormones, the first step is remove the unnatural things that cause hormone imbalances. And you can make gigantic changes in your hormonal health by doing that. And the way to do that is start to look at labels. The website we usually tell people to go to is ewg.org. That's the environmental, what is it? Workers group. And they list everything on there. And you want to get very familiar with this stuff because you're not going to remember it all. But like your air fresheners, your fabric softeners, those are estrogens. Your MSG can be in a lot of stuff. It's in a lot of your non-organic spices and herbs. You'll see it in a lot of different stuff. Like those chicken bouillon cubes are loaded in MSG. And those will spike your insulin. So the first thing about naturally balancing hormone is remove the unnatural triggers and read those labels. Make sure you're getting organic. Make sure it's free range. And then the next thing is what we do, our first process is improve the gut and the liver detoxification pathways. Soon as those two things have occurred, you're light years ahead of the process, and it gives your body a chance to start to get in this recovery mode. Because again, for the body to be healthy, for the body to be fertile, for the body to have vitality, you have to have harmony. And harmony is only achieved through homeostasis or balance. And so that's what we want to give you the chance to, right?
Yeah.
Anything you want to add for everybody today?
Well, this is just one of my favorite pillars.
Yeah.
Because by this point, we've cleaned up the gut, we've improved digestion and the detox pathways, and then formed a style of eating that's just right for our patients. And then we get to hormones. This is where I see yet again another level of change, where people start to go in this direction that they never thought was possible. And they say that.
Yeah.
So when you start to balance your hormones as well as the other things, then you can start to actually affect other parts of your body
Yeah,
and other systems.
exactly. Would you say that this is an easy thing to do?
Easy? No.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Right. And I think that's one of the things is you got to remember you're getting an individualized health approach. This doesn't exist out in the normal medical model. And so we are piecing together your health one step at a time. And it's 100% on you. And to naturally fix something without blocking or disrupting is a little bit more time consuming. And so it takes those months of the plans that we put you on. But this is how you correct things long term. And then to keep it that way, you have the education to know what caused the problem in the first place.
Exactly.
Right?
I think that's part of the fun of the process, and that's what makes it individual.
Yeah. And so it's all about trying to get back to balance. And what do we say? A balanced body is a what?
A healthy body.
It's a healthy body. And that's what we're after. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a wonderful day. Take this knowledge, apply it. Knowledge is power, but you got to put it into action. We appreciate you all. We'll see you soon. Have a good day.